Kristina, welcome to RealPod.
Thanks for having me. So excited to be here.
Of course. How special to have the CEO of a company, Equip, that I love and that sponsors this podcast on to share their story.
It's a dream come true.
Oh, I love working with you guys. I think it's so important what you're building. And I love when things are built out of purpose and out of a personal journey. I think that's the most inspiring thing because it's someone who really understands the issue. I think about that with my nonprofit. I'm like, I was a student athlete who was struggling with these things. Mm-hmm. So now I know how I want to be like really student athlete focused. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can relate to that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm obviously biased, but I think that companies that are built by somebody who has lived experience are the best companies because, yeah, as you said, like you truly intimately get it. And as you know, like company building is hard. And so somebody who's going to have that grit and perseverance that they like need to solve this problem, it tends to align with people who have had some sort of experience with it.
Definitely. And this is also an experience that's close to my heart, having struggled with a binge eating disorder. And honestly, I've been excited to talk to you about your experiences with anorexia because I feel like it can be really misunderstood. I feel like sometimes I don't even know the inner workings of it, obviously, because that wasn't my experience. And I saw that you first struggled with this at a really young age.
Yeah. 10, which is young, but unfortunately not super rare. We treat 6-year-olds at Equip, and we're definitely seeing eating disorders come younger and younger. So yeah, I was diagnosed at 10. We know that eating disorders are biopsychosocial illnesses, and so there are a lot of strong genetic and neurobiological underpinnings. And I'm somebody who comes from a strong family of eating disorders, addictions, depression, anxiety, perfectionism, all of the things. And then for somebody who is vulnerable genetically to an eating disorder, we know that what sort of turns it on in the brain is being in negative caloric deficit, so taking in less calories than your body needs. And for me, it was something as simple when I was 10 as a babysitter dieting that I decided to try and emulate. And that was unfortunately the kind of trigger that started my first journey with anorexia.
I did not know you could be genetically predisposed to have an eating disorder.
Oh, yeah. Could you? Heavy genetic underpinning. If a parent, a sibling has an eating disorder, you're something like 10 times more likely, as likely to develop an eating disorder as your peers. So we've not identified in the field, the royal we, the academics have not identified like a gene, but certainly there are a number of different, alleles that will contribute to that. And then even more so, a set of temperament traits we talk about. So as I'm sure that you will resonate with, people who are vulnerable to eating disorders tend to be very high achieving, perfectionistic. We have the ability to hyper focus on a goal, narrow out distractions. This is why it's more common in student athletes, because these are folks who can like play through pain, study through fatigue. So they're actually really awesome traits when you learn how to channel them in the right direction. But obviously, when you just focus them on yourself and your body and the calories that you're taking in, they can be really pernicious and harmful.
And almost in a dark way, get like a high from the challenge or the restraint or the this is difficult and I do difficult things. That sort of dialogue can come into play. And to your point about being 10 times more likely, I think too, the obvious things of the way that the people who raised you then talked about food and talked about your body and talked about what you ate, like all of that's going to create an environment where you're probably going to be more prone to develop that disordered way of thinking.
Oh, absolutely. We often say genetics load the gun, environment pulls the trigger, and we live in an environment that is unfortunately just surrounded by diet culture and fat phobia and so many disordered eating behaviors being so normalized in our society. And so unfortunately, like our society is constantly pulling the trigger to put folks into negative caloric deficit.
So your babysitter started a diet. What did she say out loud? Did you know what a diet was? Like, let's get granular with this first.
I just remember she was somebody I really looked up to, who was like with me every day. And she was, not eating like real lunches, et cetera. And I just started to sort of emulate her and cut out the things that I used to love, like sweets, et cetera. And very quickly it spiraled to a point that my parents were like, I'm really concerned. I often say I have a whole lot of privilege in so many ways. And, one of the privileges is that I kind of fit what we stereotypically think people who, have eating disorders look like. And as somebody in a naturally smaller body, when I lost weight, it became visible. And so I got identified more quickly. Most people who have eating disorders, most people are not diagnosed at all. And even if they are, it's not until 3 years into their illness. So I was really fortunate that my parents did identify it. I, went to see a multidisciplinary care team, and over the course of a year worked with a therapist, a dietitian, a psychiatrist. And, my parents were really, really involved, and I, got better, had a period of good health. I remember going to middle school and joking with my friends, like, I couldn't have an eating disorder if I tried, I love pizza and all these things. And then when I started to enter puberty, I sort of freaked out, and what started as let me just lose a couple pounds to feel more comfortable with myself set off that, negative caloric deficit again, and a slow trigger back into the descent of anorexia.
Wow. So the first time, would you say that thoughts about body image and weight were less at play, and it was more so, oh, here's an interesting thing a role model's doing and I'm going to do it too because she's doing it?
Honestly, yeah, I have vague memories of looking in the mirror and like being like, oh, I don't like my face is too round. Like I would like to, have a smaller, more angular features or something. But really it was just, I'm going to copy what she's doing. And that led me into this descent.
And so then in high school, that's when the body image thoughts were more at play?
Definitely more at play. I began to enter puberty. It was my 8th grade year, so last year of middle school, and I had delayed the onset of puberty from my anorexia, and so was one of the last of my friends to go through it, and was used to being kind of the small little one amongst my friends, which I guess I really cared about that self-image of mine. And I became really uncomfortable with the pubertal weight gain. And I do remember thinking, I don't want to go back into anorexia. I just want to lose 3 pounds. And then I set a goal and I achieved it, and it felt good, and things started to spiral from there. We also know, going back to the brain science, that for folks who are genetically prone to eating disorders, and anorexia in particular, starvation feels actually calming. You sort of mentioned like feeling a high in some ways, like it actually is somewhat soothing. And so I think that certainly played a role as well.
Gosh, it's so layered and fascinating. And honestly, as you're storytelling, it's taking me back to some experiences I remember having in middle school. And we're so young at the time. It's middle school. But I remember when one of my friends came back from the summer and like her body had totally changed and she had long legs and this tiny waist. I'm coming back to like as trivial as getting in the car and comparing the thighs of me and my friends and whose thighs are the smallest. And then actually one day we had found out that one of the girls was going to be hospitalized because was just a normal doctor checkup, and the cholesterol level was so low that they were like, wait, we have to take you in right now. And we were all like, what? And it was anorexia.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's basically what happened to me. So over the next 6 months, kind of fairly slowly and then all at once, I remember specifically at the beginning, I would kind of restrict 2 days a week and then eat whatever I wanted the other 5. And then slowly over the course of 6 months, it would be restricting 3 days a week and then 4 days a week and then 5 days a week. And at some point, the restriction really took over. And I certainly did not have control over this at any point. My parents, I think, were in a lot of denial. They did not want the anorexia to come back. And by the time summer came around and they saw me in a bathing suit, and again, fortunate that like it became visible for the large majority of people with eating disorders. It doesn't, which we'll talk about.
And they probably look like conventionally what diet culture says is, quote, good. And so then they're being praised, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where yours revealed, oh, there must be a sickness happening. Where for other people, it's like, oh my God, you look amazing.
100%. And I think even at the beginning, there was some of like, oh, you look amazing. And then it descended. But I went to the same doctor that I'd been to at 10. And that day, similarly, they were like, your heart rate's in, a bad place. You need to be admitted to the hospital today. And I basically went on to spend pretty much my entire freshman year of high school not in high school. I was in and out of 4 different hospitals for a total of 7 months that year, hospitalized for anorexia.
Were you resisting treatment?
At the beginning, Absolutely. By the second or third hospitalization, something interesting happened where I actually started to like treatment. It was safe. It was a place that I felt I was with people who understood me. I don't know about you, but like I didn't love it was my freshman year of high school. Like I didn't love high school. I didn't have to be in high school. I didn't have to deal with my triggers. There's this really weird dynamic that starts to occur in some of these centers where you become competitive. Like I had doctors who told me you're going to be chronic. You're a really bad case. And I was like, cool. There were 40-year-old women who had been in and out of treatment for years. And I looked up to them. Like that was what success looked like to me. And I do vividly remember getting out of treatment and wanting so badly to be back in treatment.
Especially when you're so young, it's so formative. That becomes your community. You don't know what it's like to go to freshman year of high school. You only know what it's like to show up to treatment and be with those people.
Oh, totally.
So
I kind of was like, I'm like deeper, like I don't resonate with my high school friends who are talking about like boys and crushes and like whatever. Like I have like I was in the hospital. It became this like weird, unhealthy badge of honor.
And almost a storyline you tell yourself, this personality you now identify with. And as people are probably saying, oh, that's Kristina. Kristina struggles with this. That's the whisper. Then you take on that as the identity. Also, as we talk about anorexia, something I think about is when people struggle with anorexia for years and years and years, how do they keep on living? It's so sad. You never know what someone's going through, but sometimes it looks like there's malnourishment. But then how is that lasting year after year after year? Because wouldn't the body be breaking down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we sometimes say that people's lives kind of pause and their development sort of pauses at, whenever they develop their disorder, because you're right. Like your body is malnourished, your organs aren't working, your brain is not functioning correctly. You're sort of stunted in your disorder. And then going a step further, I have a lot of friends who I was in treatment with at 13 who continued to just like live in treatment centers for several years. And at that point, they've not really done high school. They've never like had real relationships, developed friendships, developed hobbies. Like they really did spend their formative years being, a professional patient.
Also, sometimes I wonder, do you eventually become so hungry that you don't even feel the hunger and there's like a numbness? Because honestly, as much as when I was growing up and I tried to get on Tumblr and I tried to convince myself to have that eating disorder, because in ways it was glorified, I could never do that. Any brief restriction led to binging. So then that's how I developed the binge ED. But sometimes when I even like miss a meal by accident and I'm so hangry, I'm like, how do people not eat for 3 days? I wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one, there are a lot of similarities between anorexia and binge eating disorder, and you named it is the restriction. Like binge eating disorder is also based in restriction. And for most people, that period of severe restriction will inevitably lead to a binge because your body is like, I am starving. Like evolutionarily, I want to stay alive. And so I need to binge for whatever reason. And this we don't fully understand, but it goes back to like there is some biological brain-based difference in people with anorexia that they just can sustain that. Certainly it is made easier by the fact that your body starts to shut down. Just like we say how diets don't work and are ineffective because your body's smart and it says, okay, I'm not getting food. I'm going to slow down all these functions. I'm going to stop menstruating. I'm going to, slow my heart rate down. I'm going to slow digestion. And so, you become at a certain point, like kind of immune to it. Like you don't get hungry anymore. You're just sort of numb. It's interesting. Like numbness is probably how I would best describe the period of my anorexia because I really don't remember anything outside of just being this like numb shell who was physically and mentally exhausted all the time. I vividly remember, walking up the stairs in my high school and like struggling to walk up the stairs, like struggling to even like take deep breaths, like falling asleep in class. I was just like such a shell of my former self.
I'm just like really listening to you and like reflecting, and oh, it's taking me back, and that time like sucks. And to
it's horrible.
Everything you're saying about like you're lightheaded and you couldn't get up the stairs, and then when you said before it becomes a bit of a competition, like I remember if, I would be teased about my weight, then I'd be like, okay, well, like I'll show you by like not eating, and then I fainted, and oh my gosh, I fainted, like now look how serious I'm taking this because I just passed out in front of you. Like, those things. And it's like, I feel so grateful to be so far from the memories that it takes a conversation like this to bring it back. But a lot of people still struggle with that. I also wanted to ask your opinion on what I had just said a few moments ago about sometimes you see someone and it looks like they are malnourished. But then I get into you're not supposed to comment on people's bodies. You're not supposed to make assumptions. You never know what someone's going through. How do we then actually express concern that we think someone could be struggling, but everyone's saying you can't comment on their body? But then are we all just ignoring what we think is a major problem that could kill them?
Yeah. It's such a good question. And you're right. It is a total paradox. I think just important for all the listeners to know that for the majority of people with eating disorders, you cannot tell just by looking at them. The majority of people with eating disorders are not underweight. With that said, those who are incredibly malnourished, it is visible. You can see for some subset. And of course, like, could they be going through intensive cancer treatments? Like, you never 100% know. But I am of the mentality that, like, if this is somebody in your life that you care about, who you're worried about, and, certainly if the physical signs are really on display and you notice such a distinct change from before, you should reach out and intervene. And it's really, really, really hard because a core part of an eating disorder is not knowing how sick you are and not wanting to get better. And so it's not as easy as just saying, I'm worried about you. And that person is like, oh, thank you. I am struggling. You'll probably get some resistance, but these illnesses are the second deadliest mental illnesses. Like, they literally do kill people. And we know that the earlier you intervene and get treatment, the best chance you have of a strong and lasting recovery. So, I recommend really reaching out to that person and not making it about, you look like a skeleton, right? It's more like, hey, like, I'm worried about you. Like, I've noticed that you're not as present. Like, I miss your laugh. Things like that, really reminding them of when you have an eating disorder, you don't just lose, weight, you lose your entire personality. Like, you lose so much of the essence of what makes you you, and trying to remind people of that, I think, is oftentimes more motivating than just, I notice you're not eating.
I think that's the saddest part about it for me when I think about women who struggle, is how beautiful this life can be and how much your brain can think about and create and work on, and how smart we are, and how much love we can share and space we can hold for others, that we don't have the capacity to when all we're thinking about is calories and how much we weigh.
Oh, I love that you said that, because that is, at the end of the day, that's what we say at Equip. Like, we want to take people from, on a scale of, 0 to 10, 0 being never at all, 10 being 24/7. How much are you thinking about food in your body? And at the end of the day, like, I don't actually care what you eat, what you weigh. But I want to move that number down on the scale such that you have brain space for life.
Mm-hmm. So when you founded Equip, what was the main hope in why this would be different than other types of treatment?
Yeah. So after my eating disorder, just to take a step back, when I recovered, one of the things that, again, we often talk about is those traits, when you channel them in good directions, can be used for good. And I think you and I are great examples of that. And so I quickly learned just about the gross inequities in the eating disorder field. 80% of the 30 million Americans who struggle don't get treatment, and said, I got to do something about this. So as a 15-year-old, joined with two friends I'd actually met in treatment, treatment and started a nonprofit called Project Heal, totally focused on helping people to access treatment. We literally raised money to pay for people to go to treatment because it was so inaccessible.
It's so just like grassroots. Like people need to get help. Let's raise money and let's send them to get their help, which I love.
Totally. It's kind of crazy. Like, what does that say about the American healthcare system? That like these teenage girls need to raise money to send people to treatment.
Which is such a topic right now as well. I was just at dinner with some women last night, and we were talking about how we've struggled to find the right OBGYN and the right payment and the right insurance plan. And it's like, and we are the most privileged and we have the most access, and it is difficult. Like, for us, and it's then what the perspective of people who don't, the majority of people who don't have that, it's really upsetting.
Horrifying. And then also you think about eating disorders and a lot of mental health illnesses where it's really hard to reach out for help. And so to finally be like, I'm ready to get help, I'm ready to reach out, and then be denied care is awful and can send somebody back into their eating disorder and not have them reach out again.
When you say there's 80% of people are struggling and they don't get the help, also there's probably a large percentage of those people who don't think that there is a disorder or an actual issue. They're just like, I've been told my whole life to be as skinny as I can possibly be. I'm doing that thing. And their loved ones might even be like, oh, that's great. You're killing it. How do I do what you're doing?
Oh, and doctors too. Doctors too. I mean, we have still in this society prescribe eating disorder behaviors to people in large bodies.
It's so messed up.
It's horrifying.
I had a doctor 2 years ago, an OBGYN. I went on my Instagram stories and cried about this. I was like, walked in and talking about my PCOS, and she was like, okay, so I'm going to have you cut all dairy and gluten. And I'm like, you can't just tell someone you just met to cut like two major things that are going to affect everything I eat. That I fortunately, I have the language, I have the confidence. I felt empowered to say, well, I've had an eating disorder. I will not be cutting any food groups. Yep. But someone who might not have the knowledge or education might leave that and say, oh my God, if I have gluten or dairy, that is bad. A doctor told me. I just couldn't believe she told me to do that.
Oh yeah. It's horrifying. And as you said, like, you have the tools and years of experience to be able to self-advocate, but the large majority of people really do not. I mean, it's crazy on that same line. In the Diagnostical Statistical Manual, only just in the latest edition in 2016 removed the weight criterion from anorexia because they realized the large majority of people with anorexia were not underweight. We're in normal or above weight bodies. And we've not only been missing these folks, but truly prescribing eating disorders to folks in larger weight bodies. And so I think that's, if you think about really curing, the field of eating disorders, diet culture becomes such a large part of that. But back to Project Heal. So we started this nonprofit, was funding treatment, and realized, one, just the eating disorder nonprofit field is so underfunded. It raises collectively in the United States less than $10 million a year.
I feel like that would just be the main one would raise $10 million.
Yeah. Nope. Collectively.
Not even when Nita was at the forefront?
Nope.
Wow.
Isn't that horrifying?
Yeah.
So,
I wonder why that is. People just thinking it's not that big of a deal.
It's a rich white vanity issue.
Could solve it if they wanted. Interesting.
Yeah.
And the diet culture industry is $1 billion industry. It's so heavily funded. There's probably very powerful people who don't want that to lose money. Yeah. They don't want the awareness or the help for the effect that has on people.
100%. And so I realized that it was going to be really hard to create the transformational change that was needed with such an underfunded industry. And then, perhaps more importantly, I realized that I was funding a lot of bad treatment. I was funding a lot of facility-based residential treatment centers and saw people go in, come out, go back in, relapse. They didn't know how to do it at home. And so that's what got me really passionate about. It's not enough for folks to have access to any treatment. They need to have access to like good quality treatment. And fortunately, like, we do have good evidence-based treatments for eating disorders, the leading two treatments being FBT, family-based treatment for kids and adolescents, and CBTE, cognitive behavioral therapy for eating disorders for adults. And granted, like, these treatments leave a lot of room to be desired. They've been studied on a pretty homogenous population, people who look like you and I. And yet, they are better than, talk therapy. Like they do have the strongest efficacy, and yet they were stuck in academia. Like people could not get access to them. And so that's where I got really passionate about how do we disseminate access to high quality evidence-based treatment. My co-founder was at UC San Diego's eating disorder research and treatment program, where people literally fly from all over the country and all over the world to get treatment. And it's, great treatment, but it shows you how hard it is to find good evidence-based treatment. And so we came together and said, it shouldn't be like this. People should have access to good quality treatment at home in their own backyard. And that's what prompted us and led us to start Equip.
That is powerful, the notion that you need to know how to do this in your own environment. And I think some people could look at Equip and say, well, it's virtual, so it's not going to be as effective, because that's what they think about a Zoom meeting versus an in-person all hands meeting.
Yeah.
But with the way you frame it, it's like, actually, no, we are going to find our way into your environment, into your life, help you give these tools so that there's not this major transition of like literally where you're sleeping at night.
We started this pre-pandemic, actually. It was always going to be 100% virtual because I grew up in the New York City area. We're here in LA today. You can't find eating disorder providers in these two major cities, let alone anywhere else in the country. That said, we've now treated over 6,000 patients and families across the country. We believe so strongly that virtual treatment is actually better for eating disorders. And the main reason is because I talk about the fact that you can't build a life worth living if you're not living life. Like so much of recovery is building up reasons to drown out the eating disorder and building up that brain space for relationships and hobbies and passions and pursuits. And you can't do that when you are away at a facility. And so it really gives you the ability to, be in the moment, give you treatment when you need it. Because as you know, you are fighting your eating disorder constantly, at least, probably six times a day when you have to face your greatest fear and sit down to eat. But then we want to say, like, go out, live life, be in school, be with friends, have hobbies, drown out that eating disorder. And then the other thing that's really powerful is the ability to really bring your village into treatment. So I mentioned family-based treatment is the leading evidence-based treatment for kids and adolescents. At a high level, it takes the healthy people in the home to help structure the home for pro-health behaviors. This is, again, based on the fact that we know that these are brain disorders. And it's really, really hard to ask people to fight their brain many, many times a day alone. And so FBT was, I always say, the hardest year of my life, but undoubtedly the thing that brought me into recovery. It was really hard for both of my parents to be involved. They both worked in the city, would have to commute home.
I know, I'm like, damn, that's opening up a lot of worms.
100%. But now we have folks who can, bring, like, we have parents who are deployed who are joining, treatment and sessions. We have an aunt who's really involved. We have babysitters who can really be involved. And then even for adults, while FBT is not the primary treatment that we use, the concept of like these disorders make you fight your brain, and it's really, really helpful to bring people in to help you with that, is exactly the same. Nothing changes dramatically the day you turn 18. And so we're always like, how can you just build up your support system? Mm-hmm. And that'd be really, really hard to do if everyone had to drive to a clinic in the middle of LA, Wednesday at 3 p.m.
Yeah, I love it. It's a very modern, new age approach. And I'm so glad that you're seeing success with it. Do you believe everyone who struggles with an eating disorder can recover from that eating disorder?
Yes, 100%. I believe really strongly. And this is a nuanced conversation. I mean, the field has been debating, like, what is recovery versus recovered. I say yes strongly because when I was going through my treatment, I was told so many times that this is an illness that you never recovered from, that you would like always have in your head, you'd always struggle with. And I was just like, what's the point of doing all this hard work to get better? Like it was so just demoralizing. And I genuinely do feel like I have a stronger relationship now with food and my body than most of my peers who've never had an eating disorder. That's probably a commentary on the state of our society as much as anything else. And with the caveat that like I have a lot of thin privilege. But I also am very, very aware that these disorders have they're really powerful. They have really strong genetic underpinnings. And again, knowing what we know about what turns them on in the brain, I have a lot of humility around, I'm never going to go on a diet. I'm never going to own a scale in my household. Like, I had a baby, he's 16 months old. I was not at all going to engage in any like, get your body back, right? Like, I have to be really mindful of those things, because anything that would put me in that negative caloric deficit, I'm mindful of. It also, I am somebody who absolutely continues to struggle with anxiety, depression. I go to therapy, I take medication. So, I think that recovery, yes, my brain is so much fuller of so much other stuff than food and body. And yet I have a lot of humility around, like, this is, these are mental illnesses that are highly comorbid, and you just have to be smart and continue to take care of yourself as you continue to grow old.
I relate to that tenfold. And I've never thought about how Max and I have never owned a scale together, because I would just never get one. It would not be fun to have a scale in my bathroom at my home with my experiences. And I've never 100%. Actually thought about how I'm grateful that just is a little detail we don't do either.
Yeah, I think about that all the time, actually. Like, I think a partnership and a marriage is so important. And I think in many ways, like, I educated my husband a lot on eating disorders. And, before he met me, he is somebody who probably has some of the temperament traits of that, like, high achieving ability to kind of narrow distractions. And he will say, like, he was restrictive and that it was more of a convenience thing. Like, he would just have the same thing every single day and be really regimented. And he was like applying for business school at certain periods of his life, and it really wasn't healthy. And I think when he met me, really learning about the eating disorder, it changed a lot of ways that he interacted with food and exercise. And he is such a like healthy partner to me in all the ways of like, we have dessert every night together. I have friends who, have partners who their idea of a fun weekend is like doing a 10-mile hike and then a 30-mile bike ride. And like, it would be really, really hard to be with somebody who was doing that or cutting out sugar and gluten and,
Definitely.
all of those things.
And something I always like to showcase is that the assumption of what it means to be an intuitive eater, I'm an intuitive eater, I love intuitively eating, is this notion that like, okay, well then you're just only going to have these quote junk foods, and you're going to have these desserts. And even as you mentioned, like, oh, we have dessert every night. Like, I want people to know though that when we are in recovery or we are intuitively eating or we're mindful eating, Max will frequently say, I'm ordering like a salad because of the way you've rubbed off on me and thinking that I want something nutritious and I want vegetables and I'm actually full and I'm going to leave half my sandwich and have it later. Like that, the way people maybe perceive these, okay, if you've been recovered from eating disorder, what does your household look like? Honestly, like, I don't want to put labels on it, but not the assumption people go to.
Yeah, I love that. I think at the end of the day, when you take out the restriction and allow yourself to truly listen to your body and have what's good in the moment, yes, like things that were previously off limits, like you allow yourself to eat them. And then guess what? You don't want to eat them all the time. You don't want to eat them for every meal. Your body will naturally say, I think your example was like, if you've had Taco Bell like 4 nights in a row, you're probably like, oh yeah, like sweet cream would sound really good and nourishing to my body right now. And so I feel the exact same way. I think, my lifestyle looks a lot like I eat when I'm hungry. I stop when I'm full. I allow myself to have whatever I want. Most of it is like good, nourishing things, but like I have some sort of play food or whatever you want to every day, because like I love them, I enjoy them, and like that's a fun part of my ritual and my routine.
Going back to what we said in the beginning about how when you were younger, the identity was closely tied to the treatment. I'm curious now, as the founder of Equip and a fellow Forbes 30 Under 30 sister, congrats on that, and everything that you've built, and being on the other side of your eating disorder, how has it shaped your identity, and how do you approach your life now with this work being a part of your everyday, but then you're also past it in a sense?
Oh, that's such a good question. I'm so proud of what I've been able to accomplish and take out of my pain, and I think set a real example of like when people recover from eating disorders, like they're badass. Like you can do really amazing, awesome things when you channel all of that power and energy. And there are certainly parts of my, I don't even call them eating disorder parts, but temperamentally, I've always been somebody who's like, go, 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 do, achieve, achieve, achieve. Like, how do you climb higher? And I think, there are elements of that were certainly present in my eating disorder that continue to be present and were certainly helpful in the success of getting me here that I'm really now trying to ramp down on. Like, I think my constant journey in life is figuring out, how do I be slower? How do I just like chill out? Mm-hmm. How do I just be quiet with myself? And it's interesting because from a business perspective too, that's actually what the business needs from me. It doesn't need me to be like do, filling my calendar. It needs me to be slow and thoughtful and like really steering the company in the right direction and making the right decisions. So that's been a journey for me, and I think it will continue to be.
I want to share with you a mantra that's helped me with the same thing, and it's just slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Oh, I love that.
And I think about that often. Yeah. It's like when you're smooth and you're slow, you're actually intentional and you're efficient, and you can still be successful without the chaos energy of like doing it all super fast.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I love that.
Well, I loved this conversation. So thank you, Kristina. It was such an honor to have you. Equip is one of my favorite sponsors of the podcast. I loved getting to hear your story and more about it. And I really am feeling like hopefully people will be encouraged from this conversation or send it to someone that they think might need it, or just be able to share what Equip offers with the people that they love or themselves. So thank you for the work that you do.
Such a treat to talk to you. Yay, thanks so much.
Of course.